We can begin. So welcome all to session 2 of the hackathon. So today is Monday and we'll be talking for design for disabilities. So designing for accessibility. So I will do an intro to our speaker today. Her name is Tiffany Kisiero, and she's a friend of Figma. She's part of Friends of Figma. She's a UX designer with a passion for creating accessible and beautiful digital experiences. She focuses on human-centered design, ensuring products are empowering and accessible for all. So she's very excited to share her insights on designing with empathy and inclusivity. So today's session, the goal for this session is to ensure that these teams they understand and implement accessibility in their designs. That's the goal for today. That you understand that and that you implement that as you're hacking. So we're gonna learn how to leverage Figma while doing that. And yeah, user-centered design principles. So today we'll do an introduction to Figma, user-centered design, accessibility in designs, and then Tiffany is gonna take us through some examples. So yeah, I think we can now hand it over to Tiffany. Hi,
Hello.
Tiffany.
Hi.
Okay.
Apologies for that. I'm back. I think there's an issue with my sharing, how my screen. So maybe all of us can hop onto this link because that's what I'll be majorly talking about so that we can be on the same page on Figma and accessibility.
Can you try
But first
sharing
of
them
all,
now? Because Greg
no,
was sharing his screen.
there's an issue. I know what the issue is. So at the moment, it's a scaling issue with my device. But everyone
Okay.
can be able to access that link. So I'll talk us through that. But maybe before I do, I'd like to thank Daisy for the introduction and to thank you guys for coming through, especially at night, where all of us are passionate or are expressing interest in designing for people with disabilities. So first of all, let's understand what disabilities are there, so that before we dive into Figma, dive into what we're supposed to design, we know what we are designing, who we are designing for. So I'll just briefly explain or categorize the types of disabilities out there. The physical disabilities, for example, the neurological disabilities such as cerebral palsy, congenital hip dislocation, etc. There's the musculoskeletal form of disability. So this can include amputees, arthritis, etc. Then there's also other physical conditions relating to physical disabilities, which can be, for example, dwarfism, gigantism, etc. There's the visual impairments. So people who have mild vision, low vision, blind, etc. So the people who also have hearing impairments, speech impairments, and language disability. So we have people who are hard of hearing, and there are also people who have speech impairments and also language disorders and communication impairments. Then we also have people on the spectrum, the autistic spectrum, and mental health disorders and also intellectual disability. So we have people who have mental health disorders, neurodevelopmental disorders, and I think interestingly, conditions such as dyslexia are categorized in the intellectual disability. Then we have chronic progressive disorders. And finally, maxillofacial disabilities. The reason why I wanted to just list out all this before we get into how we use Figma for solving these problems is because Many a times, as designers, we always start with the solution rather than the problem. Whereas we're supposed to start with the problem, which is more of an empathetic point of view, then go to the solution. For example, we have people with physical disabilities, people who have, for example, tremors. We'll have to figure out in your product or in your experience, how are you supposed to include people who have tremors in their hands such that when they click on something, they don't click on the wrong thing. So for Figma, that's where Figma comes in. When we're drawing our beautiful screens, we'll start putting icons which are visible, which have proper target sizes, such that if someone clicks on a button, they do the right thing. Nice. So I just wanted to list all that. First of all, just know the type of disabilities which are there so that by the time you know you are going to solve the problem for a specific audience, you know how to approach it using Figma. I assume everyone is on that link. Let me go to it myself. And to iterate, our mission, especially in Figma as a designer, it's very important. I think there's no other way to emphasize further how important it is to be inclusive in your designs. It's an essential part of the process, and it's also you coming up with a product or a service for which will go beyond you, which has impact not just for yourself, but it can span to other parts of the world which you didn't even think of. So inclusion starts with knowing what you're going through. I mean, knowing what your product is trying to address, and also the challenges that arise from access. Then trying to figure a way of how people can access your product better. So Figma is taking that perspective where inclusion starts with being aware of those that might have challenges accessing your app or use it differently, and extends always to you remaining cognizant of how your app portrays people. I'll start with the mixed reaction of a product out there. So, for example, if someone who is visually impaired goes to buy something in the supermarket, if they don't have cash, alternatively, they should be using mobile money or the bank app. But have we ever thought beyond how is some like other ways in the supermarket people people who are blind can actually pay? Sometimes it's really hard. Talking to someone, there's someone who came to an X space a while back and mentioned that as a difficulty. The solutions are there, but they didn't really encompass such a person. So you might say, for example, using the what is it called, M-Pesa app to transact. But what if that person has to rely on someone else to enter the PIN, or they're not in a position to start entering the password, etc. So putting yourself in such positions where you go deeper into thinking, what if this person does not have access to the majorly assumed senses that people should quote unquote have, is what inclusive design is all about. You are designing basically on an edge case mode. What if someone cannot see what you're writing? What if someone cannot hear? What if someone cannot understand? What if someone cannot navigate the way any other person would? What measures have you put or included in your product, in your service, in your app, in your website that will enable every single person to enjoy your service, is what inclusivity and accessibility is all about. So in the world, like there are approximately like over 1 billion individuals who have some form of impairment. And in Kenya, it's close to 1 million. It dances around 900,000 people who have some form of impairment. That's why you can't really sideline this topic of designing or leaving out people with disabilities. Hello?
Hi, Tiffany. I think we lost you for a few minutes. So.
Oh, okay. Where did you leave me off?
We are giving statistics of the number of people with impairments here in Kenya and
nice.
the world.
Yeah, I think that is like a few seconds ago. So for in Kenya, it's close to 900 million, and in the world, it's 1 billion. So from an impact point of view, we all have a very big role in designing products that are accessible to the billion people so that they can be able to enjoy experiences that they ought to. And sometimes it's really hard, honestly, from a designer point of view to implement accessibility and inclusivity, because sometimes it doesn't really match the business goals in terms of timing and etc. But in your hackathon, I know that with mentorship and guidance, these are not really excuses or limitations that will hinder you from designing products and services which are going to touch people's lives, specifically people with disabilities. So you can start with a specific target audience, then now scale out. Because when you're designing products, it's for scale. So for people with disabilities, it's more or less the same, the scale aspect, where you start with a specific region, then solutions which are fitting different contexts, like the different contexts you want to serve. So even if it's a hackathon, always think of scale, not just the people you serve around, but on a larger region. Then now I'll skip and hover on to where the different accessibility tools. A really good one is what Microsoft are doing with the inclusive design toolkit. I'd recommend you guys check it out. They also have a content toolkit as well. It's a really good design guidelines. They spell out everything in terms of how you're supposed to communicate and also how you're supposed to implement accessible products. So as I mentioned before, in terms of the types of disabilities, Microsoft categorizes them into 3 categories. So there's the permanent disability, temporary, and situational. Permanent being it cannot be reversed. Temporary being it can be reversed, and
Hi, Tiffany. We've lost you again.
these 4 sections. So there's from the touch perspective, the see perspective, hear perspective, and see perspective, speak perspective. Remember I mentioned other forms of disability, which I don't think have been which have been captured here from the learning perspective and for people on the spectrum. So also make sure you have that at the back of your mind. The amputee, I think we mentioned that. So that is someone who's permanently disabled. With such disabilities can be able to navigate around. Then the reason why there's all these perspectives is because if someone does not have, someone has that limitation, you have to figure out how they'll be able to interact with your product or your service, or how that product or service targets them. So if it's a situational perspective of a new parent, if they want to, for example, record something regarding their child, how are they able to do that as they're carrying their baby? You need to think of such interventions. So maybe text to, or I mean, voice to text would be an alternative, or just simple ways that a mom can be able to input data on their phone without having to put the baby down and all that. Then there's the C perspective, someone who's blind, someone with cataracts on the temporary, and then a distracted driver. If you want to switch the channel on your on the Spotify app, so how would someone who's blind do that? Or someone who has cataracts or a distracted driver? That different interventions you design for that, and you need to account for it. Then here it would be if someone who is deaf, or on the permanent section, or someone who has an ear infection which will clear away, or a bartender, there's a lot of noise, or there's a lot, or someone who's on under a mabati roof and there's a lot of rain. How will you be able to communicate uh, various pieces of information if they want to listen to, if they want to access a podcast, for example? How would a deaf person do that? How would someone with an ear infection do that? Or someone who is in a busy loud environment, how would they do that? So maybe subtitles, etc. Then from speaking, non-verbal, laryngitis, heavy accent. Access. Hello? Are we together?
Yeah, we're together, but you keep on breaking at different points.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I think it's my internet in this part of the country. It's quite unstable.
That's all right. I think we're able to follow through to what you're going.
Explore, like for example, for the C, a unique case would be color blue. So there'll be is the different plugins on there are. Then now figuring and now if you have like in your design system or in the look and feel of the app, if there are two colors, for example a yellow, I mean, yeah, to make sure that colors can be told apart. There's some people who can't really tell apart so plugins
Hi,
such
Tiffany.
as Able would be. Hello?
Hey, could you go back to when you started talking about guys who have visual impairments? Hello? Hello, Tiffany. You're on mute.
Hello?
Hello.
Oh yeah. So I think I left.
Let's give her a few minutes.
How about now? Can you guys hear me?
Yes, right now we can hear you.
Okay, I think I'll just focus on this tab. Well, like for people who are colorblind, there are plugins on Figma like Able and the like, Contrast, which are able to help you come up with colors that people with color blindness will be able to view or to interact with much easily. So that various interventions. So in this example, there are like there's the different shades of yellow. There's some people who have a hard time telling apart different shades of yellow, red, green. So such plugins are able to help you now implement such different contrasts such that people are able to tell apart different colors. The challenge would be, for example, if your brand colors are for example, yellow and blue. There's some people who have yellow-blue color blindness. I think it's called trichronomaly. So now also figuring out how you can Able will help you to now come up with palettes or alternatives close to your brand colors such that people will be able to access and enjoy your experience. Any other thoughts on people on disabilities? Usability. as much as we're designing cool products which keep people with disabilities at the front and center, we also have to ensure that we keep on testing, we keep on ensuring that these things can actually be used. Then the laws, I think one mentioned like the aesthetic usability effect. You have to ensure that it's not only beautiful, but it's also usable by people. Yeah, that more resources down there that you'll be able to research. There's one which they've not mentioned, which is like at the core of all this. I'd like you to just Google that later on. WCAG, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. Just go through them. They are at the heart of designing accessible experiences. Hello? Yeah, just go through them. They'll really help you design accessible experiences. Okay, let me just pause right there and ask if there are any questions before I show you products which are out there, which are user-centered, which are human-centered, which are designed for people with disabilities. Before we go on, I'm so sorry for the poor connection quality before we continue. Cool. So in WCAG, if I can just mention something in brief, there are 4 guidelines like we're supposed to design with. It's called, in abbreviation, POA. So it's perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. Perceivable meaning when you're designing for persons with disabilities, yeah, you can check them out. You need, like, it needs to be perceivable. People need to be able to pick up or perceive from the definition, they're able to perceive what is being communicated. So if you're on an app, if you're on a website, if you are on a device, users should be able to pick up or to be able to follow along instructions or to be able to see what they're, not see, they're able to understand or pick up what they're supposed to do, to perceive, to pick up that information, basically. And there are a couple of things which will help, a couple of interventions. So we have text alternatives. So if you can't really fully rely on text at some points of your experience, you can use images or icons. You can use captions. You can use good fonts and good hierarchy, such that, especially for people who have low vision, it starts with design. Make sure that your headings are in the right format. You're not using a title in one end, then in the other end, the following you're using maybe a different heading which is not supposed to be there. Maybe you're using a H2 before a H1. Those things are really important. So make sure that you're using the right hierarchy of headings and paragraphs such that people who, like, if you're passing along your experience to, or rather if you're, for example, if it's a website, if people are coding it out, you're using the right headings. Even if someone who has low vision or who is using a screen reader, they're able to do the right thing because from the get-go in design, it was implemented in the right way. Then we have sign language interpretation in the case of videos, subtitles. Yeah, subtitles. There's a very important case study. You guys should check it out on the rise in use of subtitles, where right now, even if you do Netflix or you're doing YouTube, you can see subtitles being used all over. And when you look at the perspective of the here, where there's the permanent, the situational, and the temporary, the subtitles intervention, it cuts across all of them. And it's accessible for everyone, even people who don't have the disabilities from the hearing perspective, you you can easily use it, and you'll be more likely to use subtitles and the product all around. Then there's resizable text, proper proper. You guys lost me again.
Brother, hey, video yang personal
Hello?
lah bilang udah.
You guys lost me again, or we're together?
No, we didn't. I think it's just my participant was unmuted. Just go on.
Awesome. So there's contrast, text spacing, and line heights. In Figma, it's really cool because with plugins for contrast, they're there. Then for text spacing and line height, you can set them. That by default, they're accessible, but you can always adjust them to your liking. So for line height, it's 1.5 times the font size. So if your font size is 16, the line height will be 24. The spacing following paragraphs, so you have paragraph 1, paragraph 2, it's 2 times the font size. Then there's letter spacing and word spacing. They also have their own rules. So that's for perceivable. There's operable, understandable, and robust. I won't really go deep into it, but kindly go through WCAG and understand all that. So good implementation of accessible designs. I don't know if we can do this. There's something really cool EABL has done that I'd want to show you. If you can click on that link on the chat. Because I can be talking here endlessly and say a lot of things, but it might not really click. So maybe if we use examples, it might stick a little bit better. Nice. So I think after you accept the age limits, or you can confirm just for now. You can enter any age above 18 that will put you above 18, because there's something really cool they've done. Nice. So could you click on this accessibility icon? So EABL, as it is, recognizes that there are people out there who have some form of disability. And because they want everyone to enjoy the experience, there are a couple of settings that they've implemented such that the overall UI can reflect that. So if it's contrast, I think I mentioned something to deal with contrast, where some people who might have color blindness issues might have trouble detecting certain colors. So for example, red being one of them, they can be able to change saturation as well, bigger text. Oh, and I forgot to mention, there's something under understandable, the understandable principle in WCAG, talking about timings. So for some people who are on the neurodivergent spectrum, it will be really hard for them to keep up with the timing. or is it under understandable or operable? I think it's operable. So giving people enough time. So if it's slides, there's some slides which animate really quickly on that site, but when they switch on, there's a certain setting they switch on, it actually slows down, or they are given the option to pause, stop, and hide. Yeah. Oh, nice. They've really shortened it really well. Yeah. There's, yeah, the pause animation settings. It's able to do that. And something I mentioned just briefly on the types of disabilities, dyslexia friendly. So there are people who have really a hard time reading certain texts due to that disability. The dyslexia friendly setting allows them to, what is it called? Allows them to read, changes the font, number one, and makes the font sizes and the hierarchy much easier for them to understand. Oh, and something to, I think I'll blame myself for not saying this. When you're coming up with a website or coming up with any product or service, make sure the language is understandable. It doesn't have too much jargon and it's broken down. This is going to be a win for everybody. You don't just fill information without breaking it down into sections which people can digest. So it's not just for people with dyslexia or people with learning disabilities, it's for everyone. Yeah, the line height issue is also coming up here. It helps with the readability of text and long paragraphs. So if you have websites, if you have text-heavy websites, line height is key. Line height and font. Don't use funny fonts. Use good sans serif and serif fonts that people can read and understand. So that's a really cool example of how accessibility has been implemented in such a robust site, in such a site. Then another cool product that is out there, it's called X-ray.glass. Before I mention, yeah, X-ray.glass app. Let me paste that here. Where is it? Yeah, that's another app. You can check it out. So these guys are using IoT, Internet of Things concept, where there's an app that shades, and that the people who have hearing disabilities, their lives are subtitled. So there's the automatic and cross-language subtitling of conversations. If they wear these glasses, if they're on the app, they can follow along conversations with people who are speaking around them, and they're able to follow along the conversations in real time. So remember, this is real time. Don't wait so that you can see what this other person is saying. Once someone is communicating and speaking, they're able to read or follow along what someone is saying from their phone or from those sheets. Really cool. You should check it out. Then another cool one from a Kenyan concept is, I had it here. Ishara. Yeah, it's Ishara. Let me paste the link as well. Ishara.co.ke. Oh yeah, just give me a second. Let me paste it here. So this is from a Kenyan perspective. They don't have shades, but they do have an app which supports people who also are hard of hearing. They're able to follow along or to know what's going on when they go for their medical visits. In short, I think it's loading. Yeah. So this is not from speaking, this is more from the sign language perspective. Someone signs, it's able to pick up and translate. Really cool concepts. And then I think something from the final one for tonight. Oh, there are two. Of course, this one I must share. This is for Datability. It's called Datability. I'll just mention it in passing as well as Be My Eyes. Let me just share the link. Maybe you guys will benefit from that. There's datability.com, Datability app. So this is specifically targeting people with disabilities, help them find love, basically, but it's targeting people with disabilities. Then the final one, which I think stands the test of time, is Be My Eyes. I think this has been here for a minute, where people who have low vision, who are visually impaired, are able to get guidance. They're able to navigate with the help of Be My Eyes volunteers. Yeah, from that perspective. I'd like to mention there are not many like Kenyan context examples. I hope that your hackathon will be a genesis of those many examples out there. Yeah. The reason why I took a lot of time just explaining to you why, what, the context, is because before you even enter Figma, design has already happened. I want to build that mindset into you guys. Before you start figuring out how to use the able plugin or the contrast plugin, you need to understand the people you're designing for first, the type of situations they might be in, the kind of interventions you might come up with, and that's the heart of it, because your approach may not be the same. Because you've seen the way this approach of Ishara is not really the same as X-ray glass. These are two different products targeting the same audience. They're people who are hard of hearing. So just understanding who, and then understanding the various interventions and the guidelines, so that by the time you learn Figma and you start opening the app, you start drawing things, you know who, you know what, you know how, and you know why. That was the goal of my session. Yeah. Now you can ask your questions as well, so that we can call it a night. Yeah, but that's it from me.
I think I can just go through the chat section. So, yeah, so Greg said empathy should be the closest solution, and that's true from what you see. And then all those links, I think they'll be shared to everyone that will to their emails. And then yeah. So I'm nothing. Okay, Dennis has said standard design for inclusive design with long-term perspective, acceptability summit early emphasized on that. Yeah, and you've seen the resources that Microsoft provides on accessibility design. So yeah, we're looking, as she said, we're looking forward to you guys building more solutions in Kenya that cater, that accommodate people living with disabilities, and we're looking forward to that. So we're gonna have accessibility engineers go through the projects next week. And that is something that we are keeping at the core of everything that we're doing, because at the end of the day, these solutions will be used by people who are living with disabilities. So I think that's it from me. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention we have design mentors on standby. So if you're here and your team um did quite get what was covered today, we have design mentors on standby. Just reach out to me and I will give you a mentor. We have Mandela as well on the call. I think Winnie, you can say something for a few minutes, maybe 1 minute. Yeah, so we have mentors on board and they're willing to help. We design mentors basically, and they're willing to help the teams work in accessibility in their solutions. So I think that's it from me. Mandela will say something maybe for a minute. She is from Friends of Figma, and so is Tiffany. Then Greg will wrap it up for us tonight. So yeah.
Thank you, Daisy. Hi everyone. I hope you guys have learned a couple of things from today's sessions led by Tiffany. As you have heard, my name is Winnie Mandela and I'm the Friends of Figma advocate for the Nairobi chapter. I'm wishing you guys all the best. Just hope while you guys are getting your solution, please keep in mind to use the design thinking strategy. I think that will help you guys in speeding up your development process. Yeah, that's all. And before I forget, ensure that if you're making a product, it's a sensible product. Don't build an app for the blind people to see. I'm not sure if they'll be seeing anything though. Okay, bye. Back to you, Daisy.
Thank you, Mandela, and thank you for supporting us together with your community from Friends of Figma. So Greg, you can just close it for us tonight. Oh, I'm seeing a
Right.
question. Hold on. Yeah, so hey Daisy, how can I access a mentor? So we have the technical mentors who are assigned to the teams on Friday. But aside from that, we have design mentors specifically to ensure that you incorporate accessible designs from the beginning. So if you want a mentor, kindly reach out to me. You can email me. Let me share my email. You can email me about the mentors. Yeah. So just email me that your team needs either a technical mentor or design mentor, and then I will get back to you on that. So yes, Greg.
Hi, everyone. Hope you're well and hope you're doing good. And I hope you've learned something from today's session. We have learned a lot about the types of disabilities that are there, just to begin with. The visible disabilities, invisible disabilities, and Tiffany has really gone through her time to explain the types of disabilities that are there and the specific pain points that they experience from their day-to-day lives. Something as simple as paying for goods at the till might not be as easy as it is for you for someone else. So she has talked about people who experience tremors. How do they go about pressing the right button? People who are blind. And these are just some of the few things you should consider when you're creating a solution for people living with disabilities. So I really hope you've learned something. When it comes to the examples of Kenyan apps for people with disabilities. One other example I can give, although I know this is a fairly new one, it's called Riziki. And Riziki essentially is like a LinkedIn, but for people with disabilities. So if you have a disability, you get to sign up there. And then now, because there's always this disconnect, there are companies that are looking for persons with disabilities, especially because they also want to increase the diversity and inclusivity ratio. And then now there are people with disabilities looking for jobs, and they are put to compete with other people who might be able differently. So this app essentially just put them in a pool together. And so now companies are able to find persons with disabilities in order to employ. And now persons with disabilities are able to have an easier time finding a job that they qualify for. So that's just another example in the Kenyan context. I really can't wait to see what all of you people come up with. I already know that most of you already have ideas right now and have started building, so keep it up and all the best in the hackathon. So if there are not any other questions, I'd like to end the meeting. You will receive the recording via email as well as the link to the next session. Thank you so much for joining and have a good night.